Good morning once again. My name is Dr. Soni Badma. I welcome you to the second day of the National Maritime Heritage Conclave dedicated to the theme of Unsung Frames in Indian Maritime History. I now call upon Ms. Amrita Talavekar to open the thematic session of Women in the Indian Maritime History with her welcome and introduction. Amrita Talavekar is a research associate at the Maritime History Society. She is an architect by profession and holds a post-graduation degree in architectural and urban conservation from Kamla Raheja Vidyanidhi Institute of Architecture and Environmental Studies. Her areas of research are documentation and conservation of built heritage, shipbuilding, and heritage of India. Over to you, Amrita.
Thank you, ma'am. Good morning to one and all present with us today. Our vision at the Maritime History Society is to evolve into a body of eminence in the field of maritime history through nurturing of historical research among young mariners, showcase Indian maritime heritage, and publication of emerging perspectives for a vibrant and resurgent maritime India. Moving ahead towards this vision, this session is based on the theme Influence of Women in the Maritime History, in India's maritime history. Women have proved to be avid warriors and brilliant administrators while securing a place in history, be it in fields of warfare, politics, art, literature, and business, among the others. Across time, we have seen women as be a part of the social, educational, and humanitarian circle in society, contributing immensely to every field. The maritime medium or the sea doesn't see gender. A number of women have proved themselves in the field of shipping, warfare, aviation, and sailing, among the other fields within the maritime domain. This session thus looks into the contribution of women in the maritime field. We have with us today three eminent speakers whose for the whose sheer love for the maritime field has brought them with us today. We have retired Lieutenant Commander Rajeshwari Kori, first woman officer to be posted on board a warship in the Asian subcontinent, who has been featured in the Limca Book of Records. She's been felicitated with Yashashwini Award by the Ministry of Defense by the hands of Chief of Army Staff and the Defense Minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, in April 2018. She's also sailed on the last leg of circumnavigation in 2003-2004 on board INS Tarangini. She's currently the Deputy Controller of Civil Defense in the Government of Maharashtra and has led many rescue operations in collaboration with the Government of Maharashtra and the Indian Navy. Glad to have you, Lieutenant Commander Kori.
Thank
Next, we
you.
have Cheta Jadhav, First Mate and Marketing Manager, SY Antara.
Hi, everyone.
She's participated in the Clipper Round the World race in 2017-2018 and is a RYA certified crew member of the sailboat Antara. She's an entrepreneur and has undertaken various assignments in the past, demonstrating her leadership and managerial skills. Team MHS has sailed on board Antara with Captain Dilip Donde and her, and for me personally, it was an unforgettable experience. Glad to have you with us today.
Thank you.
We also have Ms. Reshma Nilofar, India's first and only woman marine pilot. She's currently a pilot at Kolkata's Shyama Prasad Mukherjee Port Trust. She sailed for 2 years with Maersk, the container fleet. She pilots ships in and out of Calcutta, Haldia Port, Budge oil terminals, Diamond Harbour, and Sagar anchorages. She's a mentor for women in shipping and an advocate for gender diversity and inclusion. Welcome, Ms. Nilofar. We also have with us Ms. Purvi Shriyan, Adjunct Research Associate, Maritime History Society. Glad to have you. With these introductions in order, let's start with Lieutenant Commander Kori. Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, my
Hi.
first question my first question to you is, this field is really diverse. And I would like to know what inspired you to enter this maritime field.
I joined the Navy in 1995, and it was being from a naval background. My father was also in the Indian Navy, and in my college days, I had heard Admiral Awati's speech on joining the Indian Navy, so it inspired me to join. And once I joined, I was the fourth batch. Navy has been always proactive in giving more berths to women officers, more exposure. Probably it is because of the our exposure to Western countries. We are going on goodwill visits, and also we see the world and we see compare ourselves. So we like to give that kind of platform to our women also. So when I joined in '95, it was only onshore jobs. And I was very delighted when I heard that the Navy is also thinking of posting women officers on board ships. So, as such, I piped up and I said, I would like to join. And it took some time to think over how to go about it, what to do, in pairs we should send, and whom should send along to. And then it was decided, and I got my sea legs on board INS Jyoti in 1997. I was posted along with then Surgeon Commander Vinita Tomar. So she was from the medical field, and I was from the logistics. And we sailed through for almost 18 months on board.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. This is really very inspirational, and for everybody who's looking at, who's watching this session, I think it's really inspirational. Coming to Miss Jata.
Hi, everyone.
So I was on Antara, and that was my first sailing experience. So I want to ask you, do you think sailing in India is an adventure not many opt for? And if you think, what is your opinion on that?
Yes, I think that a lot of people are worried about sailing and about getting on water. They're afraid of the water, and it is something that on Antara we want to make as simple and as possible for anybody who wants to sail. And the whole idea of having Antara is to offer the opportunity to sail to anybody who wants to take up the adventure, and to gradually make it as ordinary as going on a trek or going rappelling or taking up any other adventure in the country.
Yes, ma'am. So what triggered you into sailing?
Well, actually, it was two things that did that. One was at that time, Commander Dilip Dhonde. He wrote a book called The First Indian, and on reading that, I was really inspired, to understand that there was somebody like this who could just, go around the world alone. And then subsequently, after meeting with the Tarini officers, and I was witness to their entire training process with Dilip, and I was impressed and heartened by how they grew from absolutely novice sailors to being able to do a circumnavigation. And to me, that was inspirational. That if they could do it, then why not any one of us? And that is when and obviously because this was a naval expedition, I couldn't really be part of it to the extent that I would have liked to. I mean, I would have liked to go on overnight sorties with them. I would have liked to do longer distance trips. But, as a civilian, that wasn't possible for me. So the best option then was to take up some kind of civilian training in sailing. And while I did some amount of training in Bombay Harbour, what really helped me was the participation in the Clipper Round the World race. I did a leg, the transatlantic leg between Punta del Este and Cape Town in 2018. And for me, what sort of made it good for me was the fact that I did this at the age of 50. So that's something I want to put out there, that gender and age are, just in your mind. It's not something that you want to say that this stops you from doing something. And for me, it was a big high to be able to sail into Cape Town on my 50th birthday.
Totally. So you just brought this point out that age is not the barrier for doing anything you want to do in life. So
Absolutely.
I think being on Antara was my first sailing experience, and it was an adventure in itself. From climbing the mast to
I
pulling ropes, we did everything. But since we were a
I
team,
hope
we
it's
did it
not
in
the,
a team. But
yeah.
for
Sorry,
you
I
to do
hope
it,
it's not your last experience.
yes, totally. I'm waiting to come back, ma'am. So it was just your pure passion for sailing, which is really commendable. So now I'll
Thank
get
you.
in Miss Nilofer.
Uh,
Ma'am, coming to
Hi,
you. Hi. Coming to you, you're the first and only woman marine pilot in India. Why do you think no other person has opted for it? And what inspired you to enter this field?
see, for me, when there's somebody telling you that there hasn't been anybody doing this, I thought that my only thought was that there has to be someone to start. There's always a start. There's always a first time. So that itself, the whole, what I heard that nobody has done this before, that itself was a big inspiration for me that, nothing is impossible. There are women training to go to the Mars. And here we are in 2020 thinking about, what we cannot do as women and why. So there's only one way to find out, which is by doing it, actually. So, I just got out to actually start doing this. I trained for many years and here I am, and it's a very, very rewarding career.
Totally. I think what you've brought forward is nothing is impossible and you need to just start. So I wish I had the daring of doing something like that. So, moving forward, while all of you have set your mark in the maritime domain, historically we've witnessed several women in this field whose passion and dedication and sheer love for the sea is quite evident in their doings. I would now bring up Purvi. Would you want to talk about them?
Yes, yes, of course. So
Over to you.
we all know about how our country was not served independence on a silver platter. It was fought for people. It was fought by people of a country with blood and sweat. We had men, women, and children all involved in this war. Many prominent ladies have been a part of this struggle. Hardly any of them were given these limelight. Rani Abaka was one of such earliest Indians to fight away. She is also known as one of the first women freedom fighter of India. Since the 7th century, maritime trade, especially in spices, textiles, war horses, etc., had flourished between communities of India's western coast and Arabian Peninsula. With an eye on this lucrative trade, several European powers has been trying to discover new sea routes to India. The Portuguese finally became the first Europeans to find a sea route to India when Vasco da Gama reached Calicut in 1498. 5 years later, the Portuguese built their first fort in Cochin. This, along with their superior naval technology, put the control of the spice routes to India into the hands of Portuguese. The whole of the 16th century was dominated by the Portuguese only, and was unchallenged by any other European power. Trading in the Indian Ocean, which had a free trade zone for Indians, Arabs, Persian, African ships, was now required to pay the permit, which was known as cartas from the Portuguese. The naval superiority of the Portuguese meant they were inevitably won against the local rulers who rebelled. In 1526, the Portuguese captured the Mangalore port. Their next target was Ullal. Ullal was the capital of the Chotwa king Tirumala Raya III. As the Chotwas were a matrilineal dynasty, the king's heir was his young niece known as Rani Abaka. The fierce independent princess has been trained in sword fighting, archery, cavalry, military strategy, diplomacy, and every other subject of a statesman at a very young age. As such, when Abaka was crowned the Queen of Ullal, she was deeply aware of the threat posed by the Portuguese present on the coast and was equally determined to resist it with all she had. Ullal, being a port town, was known for its strategic importance. This is why Portuguese was desperate to capture it. With an eye on Ullal's trade, the Portuguese has been trying to extract tributaries and taxes from Rani Abaka. But Rani Abaka's non-compliance with these Portuguese demands further fueled their plans to get a hold over the region. Her ships continued to trade with the Arabs despite attacks by the Portuguese. From Mogviras and Bilawa archers to Mapilas, oarsmen, people of all castes and religion found a place in her army and navy. The Mogovira Muslim fishermen were extremely powerful assets of her naval battles with the Portuguese. Infuriated by her efforts, the Portuguese began attacking Ullal repeatedly. The first battle took place in the year 1556, which ended in an uneasy truce. 2 years later, the Portuguese attacked with a larger force and were unable to ransack the settlements at Ullal to some extent. However, Rania Abaka's masterful battle tactics and diplomatic strategies pushed them back once again. During the next battle, the Portuguese army attacked Ullal and managed to capture the royal palace. However, Rani Abaka escaped before they could capture her. Along with 200 loyal soldiers, she raided the Portuguese in the dead of the night and killed the general along with 70 of his soldiers. Frightened by the ferocity of the attack, the remaining Portuguese troops fled to their ships. By this time, the Portuguese had become alarmed about Rani Abaka's growing reputation, inspiring other rulers as well. When repeated frontal attacks didn't work, they resorted to treachery. A series of edicts were passed to make alliances with the defend queen illegal. In 1581, 3,000 Portuguese troops, supported by an armada of battleships, attacked Ullal in a surprise pre-dawn attack. Rani Abaka was returning from a visit to her family temple and was caught off guard, but she immediately mounted on her horse and rode into the battle, leading her troop in a fierce counter-offensive. Her piercing battle cry, "Save the motherland! Fight them on the land and sea! Fight them on the streets and beaches! Push them back to the waters!" echoed through the winds, and she and her soldiers fired flaming arrows to the Portuguese ships. While many of the ships of the Portuguese armada burned that night, Rani Abaka was wounded in the crossfire and was captured by the enemy with the help of the bribed chieftains. Rebellious till the very end, the fearless queen breathed her last in captivity. However, her legacy lived on through equally fierce and brave daughters who continued to defend the Tulunadu from the Portuguese. The the legendary queen of the Ullal, continued to live on in folk culture of Dakshin Kannada region through Butta Kola and Yakshagana. In recent years, her story has been gradually coming to public attention. Dakshin Kannada has been holding an annual celebration in her memory, Veera Rani Abaka Utsava, for the last few years. A warrior queen who gave her life in defense of her freedom and motherland, Rani Abaka remained a major thorn in the Portuguese side throughout her rule, despite their superiority in military power. This itself speaks volumes about her courage. For her bravery, she came to be known as Abhaya Rani, or the Fearless One. Nevertheless, her splendid story remains primarily forgotten by our history books. Amrita, over to you.
Thanks, Purvi. So while this is on, I would like to add. So when you spoke, India has indeed been an eyewitness to the emergence of many courageous and passionate women across time. From what you said, so I would also like to add two more queens to the list, and that is Queen Naganika and Umayama Rani. So when we talk about them, Queen Naganika was the ruler of the Satvahana dynasty, during the 1st century BC. The dynasty flourished due to the numerous trade links with the West. As a result, ports such as Sopara eventually prospered. She became the first woman in the Indian subcontinent to even have coins issued in her name. And the fact that her name was inscribed on these coins itself proves her might during that time. A lot about her continues to remain a mystery, but she is a good starting point to begin the conversation about the women that are rare to find in the Indian maritime history. And the second woman I would like to talk about is Umayama Rani. She was the queen of Venad, which was the earlier name of Travancore, a kingdom in South India from 1677 to 1684. And she ruled on behalf of her nephew. In 1684, she is said to have aided the English in setting up a trading port at Travancore. The appearance of women in Travancore's politics was itself an exceptional one. Her period of administration was action packed, and these women have thus indeed proved to be of a lot of substance. So, arguably, these women were not connected directly to Indian maritime history, but the fact that they fought the European power on the coastline of India indicates that they must have had some kind of a maritime vision so as to defend themselves from the attacks coming from the seaward side. It also indicates that there was some kind of vigilance and alertness in place that helped them see the sea and land in continuity. At this point, I would like to get Miss Nilofar. Hi, ma'am.
Yes.
So you saw examples of these queens, and they are indeed rare female role models. So did you know about them?
Uh, just Umayama and just a bit, not so much in the detail.
Okay, so since now you know about them, you've heard about them.
It was great to know
These
though.
Yes. What sort of role models were you looking up to when you entered this field? And since you are a role model now for many women and many girls that look up to you, how do you feel carrying forward this legacy?
See, I had not had a woman role model before. Before I joined the field, because when I joined, it was purely out of chance. I was just looking for an offbeat career. But then when I got in, I did hear about Captain Radhika Menon, who is the first Indian master mariner, and the likes. But then, as a role model, what inspired me was, you have heard of Vau Chidambaran, right? So he was the first Swadeshi ship owner, and he was a Swadeshi movement member, and he was very well known and much less spoken about these days. But then what he did at that time, when the British were ruling us, was remarkable. And yeah, about us being the role models today, it's actually an honor. It's humbling, and I'm blessed to be a name etched in the maritime history amongst many other stalwarts. But today, thank you for including me, considering me worthy of being here today. It is a heavy legacy to carry, first of all, but it's not impossible for us women. Funny that in 2020, women still question ourselves whether we are worthy of that honor. Women by nature keep self doubting, and we need to step up and take this forward for the generations to come, and to be aware of our history, so that we constantly have a reference point to look back and compare our progress. Women have long stood in the backstage, and now it's time we can and we will reach for and touch our professional goals alongside even the personal goals. The maritime fraternity has been so called male dominated profession for very, very long, and we have changed a lot, and we are in the right path. we female seafaring women and also women in shipping groups are here to support, mentor, and assist the entry, the comfortable stay, and a journey for thousands of women across the globe today. Even the recognition. My biggest recognition has been the Nari Shakti Puraskar last year, when the honorable president had given me this recognition. This happens to be the highest civilian award for women in the country. But then this sort of recognition is proof that the kind of recognition, the kind of opportunities which are available for women in the country today, and will be probably be an inspiration for the next gen. So I'm glad to be that minuscule part in the history page, and to be making a small impact for the cause of gender diversity and inclusion in 2020, so that 2040 will not be the same for another woman in the maritime history book. Yes, Amrita.
Yes, ma'am, totally. I think this is very inspirational for everybody that is watching us today. And I think being a marine pilot requires boldness and commitment towards the field. So, from here, I would like to jump to the defense field, which requires boldness and commitment as well. And historically, the Indian waters have witnessed women in uniform right from the World War II. So, I would like to talk something about that. In the present times, just like all of you all spoke, women have reached new heights in every field. In 1992, the Indian Navy began inducting women for selected branches of the Indian Navy. Over the years, the branches expanded, and today we have women in the field of air traffic control, observers, law, logistics, education, naval architecture, and naval armament inspectorate. Dr. Barbara Ghosh became one of the first Indian women to have attained the rank of a commander. She was also the first woman medical officer to have received a permanent service commission. Next, Dr. Punita Arora became the first female vice admiral in the Indian Navy. Captain Radhika Menon became the first Indian female captain of a merchant navy ship. She led a dangerous mission rescuing 7 fishermen who were trapped at the Bay of Bengal in a sinking boat that capsized due to engine failure and breakdown of the boat's anchor as a result of a sea storm in 2015. With her spirit, dedication, and courage, she was a proud recipient of the top International Bravery Award by the International Maritime Organization in 2016. In 2017, the Indian Coast Guard became the first Indian force to have inducted women officers for combat and patrolling roles on board KV Kubar. In 2018, 6 women officers led by Lieutenant Commander Vartika Joshi successfully circumnavigated around the globe in a sailboat. They displayed their sheer passion, perseverance, and unrelenting spirit towards the sea on their 254-day long voyage, facing the rough seas, scorching sun, and freezing winds. Their boat was named as Tarini, or the Saving Goddess. Sub-Lieutenant Riti Singh and Sub-Lieutenant Riti Singh and Lieutenant Kumudini Tyagi became one of the first women to have joined as an observer in the Indian Navy's helicopter stream. Earlier, the entry of women was restricted to the fixed wing aircraft that took off and landed ashore. In 2019, recently, Sub Lieutenant Shubhangi Swaroop was part of the first batch of women pilots inducted in the Indian Navy. Historically, going back, defense was said to have been a male dominated field till the 20th century. India was by then under the British rule and was part of the Queen's provinces. The maritime security was under the Royal Indian Navy. During World War II, the Royal Indian Navy began inducting Indians, including women, to fill up shore jobs. The Women's Auxiliary Corps was set up in April 1942. Subsequently, the Women's Royal Indian Naval Service was part of the Women's Auxiliary Corps was set up in Feb 1944. This became a symbol of the new era and a pioneering step for women inspired to be in the defense field. Even though women never went at sea at that time, they played a crucial role in the strategizing, documentation, and decoding for the war. They were given duties like cipher work, decoding secret messages, and manning switchboards, and were trained in gunnery tactics, maintenance of equipments, etc. Primary training was held at HMIS Talwar. With the increase in number of trainees, training centers were opened at Calcutta as well. Around 1945, four officers, including Second Officer Kalyani Sen, was sent to the United Kingdom for an instructional course. Kalyani Sen thus became the first Indian servicewoman to have traveled to the United Kingdom. In 1952, nearly two-thirds women from the Women's Royal Indian Navy were of Indian nationals. The Women's Royal Indian Navy took part in discussions, debates, and general knowledge tests that proved invaluable in developing the skills and broadening the future outlook of Indian women. The sari and shirt attire of the Women's Royal Indian Navy symbolizes the new Indian woman linking modern ideology while maintaining the desire to preserve the Indian culture. The Women's Auxiliary Corps and the Women's Royal Indian Naval Service became the only women crew to have served the Indian Armed Forces in a non-medical role till 1992. Through confidence, a sense of duty, and pride for service, these women were able to make a lasting difference in the maritime defense of the country. As Lieutenant Commander Corey once said, sex is the biological construction, whereas gender is a social construction. Coming to you, Miss Corey.
Yeah.
For civilians like us, it is fascinating to see a woman in uniform, and we want to know more about your journey in the Indian Navy and now as the Deputy Controller of Civil Defense. How has the sea treated you, ma'am?
Well, in the on board the ship, it was like any other officer. There was not no discrimination, but yes, there was a little bit of caring attitude, a more looking at more caring attitude as to nothing should happen or all should be okay. So, see, if it was a male officer, it wouldn't have mattered much. Like he could have been, I had been doing the same duties what any male officer was doing. So that was nothing great about it. It's only the fact that being from a gender which is not seen on board ships was fascinating, it was a curiosity for many, and it took some time to accepting also that yes, the women are here to stay and they will be all over now. And after that posting, I did many other appointments also, shore billets. Even this present government of Maharashtra job which I am doing as a deputy controller, it was first floated in command daily order that such and such post for ex-servicemen who are retiring or who are getting released can apply for it. And I did apply and I got it. And I have done almost 8 years in Mumbai and 2 years in Raigad, Uran. And while I was in Raigad, while I'm in Raigad, last year in Kolhapur floods, my organization sent me to rescue or do relief operations for the Kolhapur citizens of Kurundwadi and Rajapur village. So we were 60 men and I was the only woman officer. Of course, there were other 4 officers also, but they were all men. When we went there, it was a totally chaos. We didn't know what to do. In fact, nobody knew what to do, and we couldn't reach to those villages, to the stranded villages. And somehow I had got an inkling that the naval boats are yet to arrive. And I was the first person to contact the Indian Navy officer there then. And I said, see, I'm an ex-naval officer and I'm from the Directorate of Civil Defense, Maharashtra. And we have some relief supplies and we need your help. I have the manpower, but I don't have the resources to go there. And that's when we decided, yes, the Navy and Civil Defense will collaborate and try and give as much of relief materials to these stranded villages. And when we reached there, we first did a recce. And when we reached there, we could understand the angst of the citizens. They were angry that almost for 5 days, nobody came up to look up at them. And it was the Indian Navy and Civil Defense which were the first people to come to their villages with supplies. There was a lot of happiness also, but at the same time, there was anger also. And one of the families also requested that if a lady who was heavily pregnant could be taken for a checkup. And looking at the amount of pressure and the resources which we had to politely tell her we cannot take a pregnant lady to the other side because of certain restrictions, but we'll definitely ask a doctor or we'll bring a doctor in the evening to help them out. They were a bit upset, but nevertheless, they relented. We also had police protection because the police station was also submerged in water. The water level at Triveni Sangam was about 50 feet. And we had 8 Geminis. And people were to cross that Sangam and go to these villages. There was one local guide with us who helped us maneuver in the water because he knew which side a building is there or the shop is there, because we didn't want the Geminis to be punctured. There are tin roofs and all. We didn't want that. And we had seen even dogs were barking. Stray dogs were on the terrace and they were barking. We just threw the food packets to them. We couldn't go near them because they would have attacked us. So this was the situation, and in that situation, the Navy and Civil Defense could come out and help with the relief supplies. I think it was a wonderful opportunity for me also, and it was a learning opportunity for all of us. In fact, my team was overwhelmed. First time they were operating with the Indian Navy. They had never ever done this before, and they were also slightly apprehensive. कि पानी में
Yes.
आप trained हो, हम नहीं हैं. So with that, we did it.
Yes,
And
totally.
thank you to the Navy yeah.
Yes, I think your job is really so satisfying. And I can see that from your face that you are really very keen on what you're doing. So,
And I can only
and
thank the Navy to make me competent.
yes, ma'am, definitely. So, you're indeed an example of lots of perseverance and dedication to this field, ma'am. So,
Thank
I would
you.
like to share here that not just defense, but you'll be surprised to know about women back in history who set a benchmark in the field of shipping and entrepreneurship also. Here I'm talking about Sumati Morarji. So, I would want to share some inserts about her. So, just like other fields, other maritime fields, shipping too has predominantly been a male profession. Being sensitive in nature, the shipping industry has been affected rigorously in the economic as well as political crisis. Varying problems and challenges are a crucial part of this industry. Being a diverse industry, shipping has involved knowledge of various fields combined together. Even with this, we've had Srimati Sumati Morarji, who set a benchmark in the field of entrepreneurship. Her journey from an ordinary woman to the executive director of Scindia Steam Navigation Company Limited, the biggest Indian shipping company in the private sector in India, is an example of her strength, will, and foresight. Sumati, or Jamuna as she was called prior to her marriage, was the daughter of a merchant prince in Bombay. Being the only daughter with 6 sons, she was the apple of their eye. In spite of this, she was always treated at par with the sons. Although she did not take any formal education, she had a sharp and brilliant mind and fulfilled her education by keeping her ears and eyes open. Her father's clients would often visit their home, from which she began to take keen interest in a few business deals. As she turned 13, she was married off to Shanti Kumar, the only son of Narottam Morarji, the father of Indian shipping. Narottam Morarji, along with his associates, founded Scindia Steam Navigation Company Limited in 1919. After marriage, Jamuna was renamed as Sumati, or the one with a good intellect. Her father in law was quick to realize her intelligence and grasping abilities and encouraged her just like her father. She was soon nominated as a member of the managing agency of Scindia Steam Navigation Company Limited. Sumati had frequently accompanied her father in law on his business trips and observed the functioning and fundamentals of all the subordinate firms. After the tragic death of Narottam Morarji in 1929, the couple had to take over the company. Sumati was too soon to steer the shipping company through its rocks and shoals. She took keen interest in the day to day affairs of the company. By 1940, Sumati took over to become the director of Scindia Shipping Company and rose to executive directorship of the company. In 1956, she was elected as the president of the prestigious Indian National Steamship Owners Association. She was re elected for the position 4 times. She treated her ships as her daughter and would frequently visit them. Like any naval chief, she instructed her ships to be kept clean and span. She was well aware of how things work at sea, the mechanism of ships, and the difficulties faced at high seas. She was the mastermind behind launching a campaign in order to protect India's shipping from the wealth tax bill and the merchant shipping bill. The decisions went in favor of Sumati, and she proved that even at rough times, she could do what a man could, or even better. By the age of 61, Sumati was synonymous to Scindia. During her directorship, the annual profits historically rose, making it highest among the Indian companies. 1949 to 1969 came to be known as the Sumati era. Her vision was not only business but the upliftment of shipping industry as well as the people. She was a woman of avid quality of leadership, entrepreneurship and competence. For those who knew her, she was not only smart-headed but also a gracious lady with immense charm and culture. I would now bring up Sucheta ma'am.
Hi.
Hi. Since you are an entrepreneur too, what do you think? How do you see the maritime field from a business point of view? And tell us more about your venture and what is your experience in this maritime field?
Well, when I started out with sailing, I realized that most of the sailing that happens today is primarily focused either in with in the naval space, as in the Navy encouraging various naval expeditions, sailing expeditions, or it is in the competitive space where you have various shorter sailing regattas and things like that. But what Dilip and I were more keen on doing was simply making sailing available as an option to anybody in India or elsewhere who wanted to come to India and sail and explore the coastline and generally just enjoy being on a sailboat. So the objective with Antara has been to Antara is our sailboat. It has been to make the option of sailing available to anybody who wants to sail. And to that extent, we offered her for either half day or full day sails in Bombay and Goa, or also for longer sails. Now, when we started offering longer sails, and that's what we would really like to do, give people the option to go out into the blue ocean and see what it feels like to be out of sight of land, to enjoy the moonlight on the waters, to watch the stars up there, to see what it feels like to be, completely at sea, so to say. And we've had a lot of people take that up and explore the sea with us and come back to try that opportunity again. And that's what we want to continue doing, encourage people to see that the sea is something that you want to make friends with, that you want to go experience, that you want to be out on, and just enjoy yourself, that it is like any other adventure that so far you've been exploring, and here's one more opportunity for you.
Yes, indeed, ma'am. So, coming to the end of this session, I would urge the three of you to share your thoughts. I would get them on screen. Yes, I would now urge you all to share your thoughts on something that you would tell the younger generation that is watching you today and that is inspired by this session and looks up to pursuing a career in the maritime field. So we'll start with Lieutenant Commander Kori, followed by Miss Nilofer and Miss Jadhav.
Yeah, Amrita, I go for my disaster management training sessions to various colleges and schools. When I tell them about the naval history, the Kargil War, my story, they're all fascinated. And then they come and ask me, how much is the pay and allowances? So that makes me a bit damp because I never looked at it as a career for salary. It was a passion. It was something which I wanted to do, something different, something out of the ordinary in those times, and wanted to keep up my family's name, my late father's name. So I joined the Navy, and I had got an opportunity to be on board ship also. So whenever these youngsters ask me about it, I tell them that it is adventurous. If you want to live the disciplined life, adventurous life, then yes, the sea is for you. The sea is your calling. Make your name, make your fame, and join for a short duration also, because there's an opportunity after being in for a short duration. And once you are confident, once you have the leadership qualities, you can always do better outside.
Yes, ma'am. I think they're really inspired from you. Miss Nilofer?
Yeah, I will specifically talk about women as pilots and women in seafaring professions. Um, seafaring or piloting is not for the weak-hearted women or anybody weak-hearted for that matter. But being the first few or being among a very very minority number. See, women seafarers are 2% or less than 2% of the world seafaring population. So you need to be prepared for everything and everyone to bombard you with their demands of perfection, because but it is our sacrifice for the whole womankind, because you're sort of carrying a flag, you're bearing the flag for the whole womankind, and you need to be really excellent at what you do. It is a profession, like piloting is a profession which demands patience and perseverance on an everyday basis, along with physical and mental acumen. So, in short, we need more women with nerves of steel, and they are welcome to come and try this profession because it is rewarding, challenging, and extremely satisfying. uh, you know um, I still, when I go on board, I still get raised eyebrows, and even captains asking me, are you the only pilot in your country? Are there other people, other women in shipping here? And we are many many hundreds right now on board ships traveling around the world. So I'd really love to have many more female colleagues, and for starters, it would be great to have some trainees in the pipeline. Uh, I'm just really looking forward to working with other women in my country in this profession. Over to you.
Shweta, please, your final thought.
Can't hear you, Soni.
You can go, Vijay.
Yeah, I was saying, Shweta, your final comment.
Yeah. Well, basically, couple of things. Firstly, the funny thing in my case has been that it has been much younger women who have inspired me. I have not looked at history or older people when it came to sailing. It was specifically the Team Tarini that pushed me and told and encouraged me to say that, hey, if they can do it, it's possible for anyone to do it. And one of the things that they have imbibed, and which I completely believe in it, is that really the sea doesn't look at you from your gender. It's got nothing to do with gender. So don't look at going to the sea as a woman. Look at it as something you want to do because you enjoy it, because it's something that interests you, that maybe could be a passion for you at some point in time. So do this because you like it. It doesn't matter what gender you are, doesn't matter what awards you may get, doesn't matter whether it brings you recognition of that. It's simply do it because you enjoy it, and the rest will happen.
All right. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I like the way you put it. So with that, let me wrap up. Thank you so much to Lieutenant Commander Rajeshwari Kohli, Pilot Reshma Nilokar, and Ms. Suchita Dadar for sharing your personal experiences and giving us a glimpse into your journeys. Your presence will inspire more girls and women to aspire for careers in seamanship. We like the way you all put it, so disarmingly and so simply. You made your journey so down to earth. Lieutenant Commander Pori said she heard, late Vice Admiral M.P. Aruti speak and got inspired. So Cheta said, well, it's not just gender. There is no such thing as age barrier either. Pilot Reshma Nilokar again made it so simple. She thought here is something that no one is doing, so someone should start, and therefore I should do it. Right? It's so interesting that we all are talking about women's struggles, but here you all are talking about the simpler side of the journey, about shifting the focus elsewhere, about talking in terms of being strong, which applies to every space, enjoying enjoyment. We are talking about interest. We are talking about things like turning everything on its own head and saying, well, just do it. You need not be inspired by role models that came before you. You could be inspired by younger women who are doing stuff right in front of you. So this is, why we wanted you on board to talk about our times. In the same breath, we envisage talking about the exceptional women in Indian maritime history. After all, our past and our present exist on a continuum, right? Your work today will very likely influence the number of women entering careers in entrepreneurship in seamanship tomorrow. Once again, thank you so much for being with us. Let us break now and meet again at 11:15 for the thematic session 3, Transoceanic Connectivity Across the Indian Ocean Region. Thank you to all the panelists and thank you to the audience as well.
Thank
That's the
you.
link.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the link. And see you very soon, 11:15.